Okay, welcome everybody to our 212th Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar. It is a great pleasure to have Subrato Banerjee presenting today, presenting a paper on cricket, and the title of his talk will be Salience of Us versus Them in Coloured Jersey, ODI Cricket as a Natural Experiment. Just before Subrato begins, I do want to quickly share an update for those interested in a conference that I've mentioned before. As you'll have seen with the reminder that came out today, we have a full schedule of talks through to into January now. If you do have a talk that you want to present in this forum, there's slots from late January onwards, and as you know, we meet every Friday. If you have a paper you'd like to present, or you know someone else who does, or a PhD student, we are always open to presentations. As you'll also perhaps recall, as much as possible, I include conference information in that. At the moment, there's only one conference in there, and I'm just going to share with you the latest poster for that. It's the Football Analytics Conference, which is currently scheduled to be the 10th of December. It's up at Oldham Athletic in Greater Manchester. You can register. There's a lineup of academic contributors and also those from the industry itself, with Newcastle United's technical director presenting. And also Lincoln City's head of recruitment will be at the event. There's also a couple of interesting names taking part on a panel. Vic Parry, the Football League chairman, Peter Ridsdale, ex-Leeds United chairman and CEO of Preston North End currently. If you are interested in that conference, please do let me know. The reason why I paused with the date is that the conference includes a football match, Oldham versus Walsall in League Two. That football match has now been rearranged because Walsall play in the FA Cup on Sunday. They've been selected to be televised, and so therefore this game has been moved to the Wednesday. We originally had the conference on Tuesday and moved it to Wednesday because of the game on the Tuesday, and now the game's on the Wednesday, and so we're working out exactly how to get around that constraint. But there'll be a conference around the 9th or 10th of December on football analytics. If you are interested, please do consider signing up for that. And if you have a conference that you are involved in the whole area of sport at any point in the near future, let me know, because I will quite happily share that information, calls for papers, registration dates, etc. Without any further ado, Subrato is very happy to take questions as he goes along. You're welcome to simply interrupt him if you have a question, because you may not be able to see once the screen is shared. And Subrato, you have an hour. We have an hour and a half in total. I'm pretty indifferent as to exactly how long you talk for, but as long as we're wrapped up by 4 p.m. UK, that's the most important thing. But all yours, Subrato. Please do take away your presentation.
All right, thanks a lot, James, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this paper. I'll quickly share my screen, and I'll put it on the slideshow mode, and I think we're good to go. Is it visible?
Yeah, got it.
All right, great. All right, so the title of this paper is Salience of Us versus Them in Coloured Jerseys, ODI Cricket as a Natural Experiment. And this is, I'm Subrato from the IIT Bombay, the Indian Institute of Technology Bombay. And this is joint work with Vipra, who's a PhD student here, and Priyanka, who is at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Now, what really motivated this study can be very well captured in this one beautiful image. I mean, if you look at this, the top panel of this image, you'll immediately see that there are two groups of individuals that are kind of in the middle of a fight. And then once you kind of zoom out and out and out and out and out, and as you do that, and you gain a cosmic perspective on this, you'll actually realize that it's not really two different groups of people. The people that are fighting are pretty much at the same place, and pretty much one. And this was actually an image. I mean, the original image was taken by Voyager 1 when it from actually the vantage point of Saturn, the orbit of Saturn. So the idea was that when the Voyager 1 was passing by the orbit of Saturn, it was Carl Sagan's idea to turn the camera back at us. And then once we looked back at Earth, effectively meaning that it was the first ever selfie. Once we looked back at our own planet, it just looked like a pale blue dot, which motivated the title of his next book. And there, in that book, there's this one beautiful quote that I'd like to read out to all of you. There's perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world to me. It underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. The next question that we are immediately interested in is, are we really tribal? So, I mean, we have documented evidence about people associating themselves with a particular tribe, and then two tribes going into conflict. And then this is not just true only for human agents. Turns out that non-human agents, with some push or drive from evolution, have also been forced to be tribal. But the question is, why are we tribal? I mean, think of two extreme cases where there's one individual who trusts nobody, and therefore, as a consequence, extends his trust to nobody. And people eventually update that information about him. It's not a very pleasant world to survive in if you're not able to trust anyone. And on the other hand, if you're trusting everybody, which is the other extreme, you're practically gullible and practically taken for a ride every time. And that also has this consequence of compromising your survival. And therefore, survival is actually about finding this fine balance between these two extremes, where as an individual, somebody draws a circle around himself, and anybody who's within that circle is an us, and anybody who's beyond that circle is a them. So from group wars to champion contests, there's a bit of a good news here. This is Steven Pinker's book. The percentage of people who die violent war-related deaths has plummeted through history, and that proportionally violent deaths decline as populations become increasingly large and organized. Turns out that there's a bit of good news here, because eventually, if one accepts that the strength of a tribe could be counted in terms of numbers, and which essentially means that the more people in a tribe, the greater is the tribal strength, then it's kind of reasonable to understand that that tribal wars will basically see reduced numbers on both the sides, and as a consequence, tribal strength could practically decline. And what's the way around it? Instead of going on tribal wars, you just engage in champion wars. So your tribe selects one champion, my tribe selects one champion. We let the champions represent us and fight among themselves, kind of the story of gladiator wars. And over here, the total number of lives lost is reduced to one at most. Humanity has evolved, and humans have realized that cooperation and non-zero sum interactions are vital for the survival of all human beings. This is Wright in his famous book called Non-Zero. However, there still continue to remain tribal tendencies among us, and we get to see that during how audiences behave in team sports. So the motivation of this study, we look at cricket, and why do we look at ODI cricket? ODI stands for One Day International. Why do we look at one-day cricket? We look at one-day cricket because in a period from 1979 to 2000, cricket was the only sport that has been played in both colored jerseys and white jerseys. Now, we're basically looking at Two images here. On the left panel, there's a celebrated batter called Sachin Tendulkar representing India against his opponent, who's also wearing a white jersey. But on the other hand, if you look at the right panel, this is Sachin Tendulkar representing India against Australia. And then, it's kind of easy to say, who belongs to what team. Clearly, it's white versus white in the left panel and blue versus yellow in the right panel. I mean, do colored jerseys really make the us versus them salient? And does that have a bearing on an individual sports person's performance? That's the motivation of this study, and we've luckily found some results that I feel are worth presenting. So let's go a step further. What are the implications of us versus them on the performance of cricket players? The effect of essentially asymmetric appearance on team sports performance. The idea is that, if you and I, we are playing against each other, and if both of us are wearing the same outfit, that us versus them is no longer salient. But then if it is something like in the right panel below, you'll immediately see that it's sorry, the right panel here, you'll immediately see that it's a game between team blue versus team yellow. So the objective is to basically look if players have different performance indicators on an average when they wear colored jerseys, where the us versus them becomes salient instead of wearing the exact same white jerseys, where the us versus them may not be so salient. All right, so we can actually go a little further up ahead. So the salience of us versus them, studies on in-group vis-a-vis out-group, in-group versus out-group tendencies have been looked at extensively. There are inherent identity associations, and then we're also looking at discrimination in the labor market, both in terms of studies where the identity of the people who are making the HR decisions are not observed, and the identities of individuals in the labor market who are actually making the recruitment decisions. Burton and Mullainathan celebrated AER paper kind of see that the callback rates between white sounding names and other sounding names have always been different. And then, of course, there are also these artificial identity separations. A motivating example of this I have already presented in a previous slide. The story of the cohorts we've already been aware. And then, of course, there's this related literature on in-cloth cognition. Adam and Galinsky's paper, I mean, of course, being seminal, where we basically look at how different colors are worn and perceived in the context of sports performances. And sports-related research is particularly looked at the effect of wearing a particular color. So in combat sports, for example, we see that wearing red, which basically signifies some element of aggression, could be associated with some distinct performance-related advantages. So why cricket? Well, ODI cricket has been played in both white and colored jerseys, and as far as I'm aware, it is the only sports performance, group sports performance, that has been played in both these conditions. So what source of exogeneity do we exploit? Well, a player's willingness to represent a team should be independent of whether or not the tournament is played in white or colored jerseys. So there's no self-selection bias. No cricketer who's just happy to represent himself, represent his country, makes a statement of the effect that, hey, I will only play those matches for India which are played in colored jerseys. So there's no self-selection here. Any cricketer is happy to just represent his country. However, since it's an empirical study, we know that the study cannot be bulletproof, no matter how hard we tried. What will be an experimental ideal? An ideal scenario will involve a single series and an equal number of matches played in both the conditions. And every single player is the same for both the teams. So then we can actually look at the same set of players, under both the conditions of white jerseys and different colored jerseys. And then we also, have the ability to control for some other effects, in this strictly controlled setting. But then in the real world, well, empirics is harsh. What we do is we do the next best thing that is possible. So we look at players who've played, in this period between 1979 and 2000, um, in both the conditions, in both the colored jersey and the white jersey conditions. And we basically look at their performances under both the conditions and make some comparisons to back out some causal statement. All right, so we have to control for the age of the player, because we are looking at a period between 1979 and 2000 when colored jerseys typically became more and more popular in the uh, in the sport of ODI cricket towards the latter part of our study period. And as a consequence, most of the players who've had a greater share of white jersey matches have actually uh, are relatively older in the data set. But then we have some controls for that as well. Let me just come to the data and talk a little more about that. So uh, we generate this unique data set of ODI cricket, and ODI cricket has been played in both colored and white jerseys in this period between 1979 to 2000. Before 1979, all ODI matches that were played in white jerseys only, and after 2000, all ODI matches that have ever been played have been played in colored jerseys only. So in this period, we're only looking at players who've played in this period a sufficient number of games in this period of 1979 to 2000, and we're going to look at their performances under both the conditions. 140 players who've played a sufficient number of ODI matches in both the colored jersey and white jersey conditions, and the unit of observation is the ith player in the jth match. That gives us about 17,500 observations. Data has been compiled from several sources. There's Wisden, Cricinfo, ESPN, YouTube videos, because for none of the matches in the earlier data sets did we really observe whether those matches were really played in colored or white jerseys. So we needed to back out some images from the ICC website and YouTube videos of whatever little recording that they remain. Right. The key performance indicators for batters, we look at the total runs that they score and the average number of runs scored per match. And for bowlers, we look at the total number of times they are able to dismiss a batsman, which is recorded as so when you dismiss a batsman, it is said that you've claimed his wicket. And then, of course, we look at the bowling average and the economy rate. Bowling average is, how frequently do you take a wicket? Meaning that, how many runs on an average do you end up conceding before you get a wicket? And the economy rate basically means how many runs do you end up conceding for every 6 deliveries bowled. All right, so that's an extensive list of variables that we use. But then let me just focus on, the dependent variables. Runs, strike rate, batting average, the rate at which um, the batsmen score centuries or 50s. Century meaning, within an innings you score a total of 100 runs or more. 50 means somewhere between 100 and between 50 and 100 runs. And then we have a set of controls among independent variables. The colored jersey variable is the main variable of interest, which is basically a dummy variable representing if a match was played in colored jersey. We look at country and opponent dummy variables. We also included venue, year of the match, dummies, some measures of workload, total number of overs bowled, total number of balls faced, and intrinsic workload of a player, whether the player is just a batsman, just a bowler, does a bit of both, in which case he's an all-rounder, or does he or she keep wickets? Sorry, he keep wickets. Between 1979 and 2000, we did not get to see a great deal of women's cricket. I mean, that's kind of caught up only recently. So we are essentially focusing on men's cricket. All right, so I'm happy to take any questions if there are, or should I just go ahead?
I can just go ahead.
Okay, all right. So what we do is we begin with pairwise t-tests. So we look at, let's say, the average number of runs scored per batsman across all the colored jersey matches that he's played within this time interval of time period of 79 to 2000. And then we also look at the average for the same player for all the matches that he has played in white jerseys during the same period. And then for each player, once we worked out the averages, what we do is that we actually uh, do the average of averages across all the batsmen under both the conditions. And once we make a comparison between white jersey and the colored jersey averages, we see that the simple pairwise t-tests basically tell us that there's a difference. In fact, batsmen are actually performing better in the white jersey condition and relatively worse in the colored jersey condition. In fact, they're scoring about 3 runs less on an average in the colored jersey conditions vis-a-vis the white jersey conditions. Strike rate, which is basically a measure of how quickly I can score runs when I'm a batter. And that's important in a limited over format when you only have a limited number of deliveries to face, and within that constraint you need to score as many runs as possible. So strike rate is more concretely measured as the number of runs that you can actually score in a given number of balls or deliveries. Turns out that even the strike rate is better for batsmen under the white jersey conditions vis-a-vis the colored jersey conditions. So on the whole, this is giving us the impression that that batsmen are performing better. They're batting better in the white jersey conditions vis-a-vis the colored jersey conditions. Let's look at. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. If you can see my cursor here, if you look at wickets, which is a good measure of capturing bowling performance, we see no significant difference. But when it comes to bowling averages, we see that the bowlers are actually doing better under the colored jerseys. And economy rate, again, we see that the bowlers are actually doing better under the colored jerseys. I mean, if you just look at the last row, it basically means that under the white jerseys, a bowler basically gives away on an average 4.4 runs, and that actually falls to about 4.2 runs under the colored jersey condition. So, and this difference is statistically significant. And if we were to just do, instead of doing a pairwise t-test, if you were to do overall results, do a comparison of overall averages, the story more or less remains the same. Batters are doing relatively worse in the colored jersey condition vis-a-vis the white jersey condition, and bowlers, on the other hand, are doing relatively better, in the case of colored jerseys. So, but these are just descriptive statistics. How about we look at some regressions? So we have YIG, which is the performance outcome of the ith player on his jth match, and the key variable of interest is the colored jersey the colored jersey dummy. Whether the jth match of the ith player was played in colored jerseys. If it was played in white jerseys, the value actually that variable takes a value of 0. And then we have some of the controls that have already introduced in the table of control variables. XIG is basically the vector of player-specific and match-specific covariates associated with the coefficient vector. We call that gamma. And UIG is just the error term. And in order to control for certain unobserved factors like batsmen ability or the bowler's ability, we also do fixed effects regression where we introduce mu I in the equation. So mu I is basically the fixed effects, the player fixed effect, and uh, and once we do the crude regression, which is shown in the top equation, and then once we do the fixed effects regression, which is shown at the bottom, here are the results for runs scored. You know, when Yij is the run scored by the ith batter on his jth match, we immediately see that the color jersey dummy takes a negative value, and this is true for you know, in the first column we do a crude OLS, in the second, third, and fourth columns we account for fixed effects. These are fixed effects regressions where we progressively add more and more controls, including for age, you know, the workload on a given match, and so on and so forth. We immediately see that you know, the introduction of you know, player fix effects, country opponent dummies, and year of the match dummies really does not change our results qualitatively. In fact, what we see is that the negative sign on the colored jersey remains significant throughout all the regressions. We typically see that, you know, as uh, that between controlling for all these effects between colored jersey matches and white jersey matches, batsmen are doing relatively better when they are playing white jersey matches. And it's the exact same story when it comes to the determinants of strike rate. So think of Yij as the strike rate of the ith batter on his jth match. And we immediately see that not only are the batsmen scoring fewer runs per match, but they're also scoring those runs lower in an ODI match. And ideally, you'd want to score as quickly as possible, given a limited over format. So in colored jerseys, jersey conditions, the batsmen typically end up scoring about 5 to 6 runs lower for every 100 balls faced. You know, in comparison with the white jersey conditions, and the results remain robust. You know, when we go from least squares in the first column to fixed effects in the second, third, and fourth columns, as we, you know, progressively include more and more controls. Let's look at the performance indicator for bowlers. You know, economy rate, again, just to remind you, is you know, how many runs do I end up as a bowler conceding on an average every over that I bowl, every 6 balls, every 6 deliveries that I bowl, how many runs do I end up conceding? Turns out that you know, under the colored jersey conditions, I'm actually performing better because I'm conceding fewer runs to the opponent team. And the results remain robust, you know, when we introduce fixed effects and fixed effects with additional controls. However, when it comes to determinants of wickets obtained by any given bowler, that there's not a significant difference between the colored jersey and the white jersey conditions. But nonetheless, it kind of gives us a hint that maybe the bowling is actually getting a little more, a little tighter. You know, maybe the bowlers are resorting to a more, resorting to a grittier approach in their bowling. All right. So how about a few robustness and a few specification checks? So exploitation of the degree of variation in jersey colors. How different do opponents look in jersey colors? Well, so it turns out that there are so many teams that are playing ODI matches, and you know, if it's a match between India and Australia, it's basically team blue versus team yellow. But then if it's a match between India and Sri Lanka, then it's basically a match between two different shades of the same color, blue. So it is maybe easy to argue that the us versus them is a little salient, is a little less salient in the latter vis-a-vis the former. So, you know, blue versus yellow is like a game between two separate colors altogether. But then dark blue versus light blue is somewhat closer to the white versus white scenario. So what we do is we redefine the colored jersey dummy uh, to equal the value 1 when it is two completely different colors. It is equal to 0 when the matches are played in white jerseys, but then it's equal to 0.5 when it is two different shades of the same color. So India and Sri Lanka, a match between these two teams will typically mean dark blue versus light blue. A match between, let's say, Pakistan and South Africa will be again something it'll be something like light green versus dark green. And in so once we introduce these once we modify the color jersey dummy to include these intermediate differences in shades, we see that the results still continue to hold. The color jersey dummy continues to remain negative and significant for batters when we are looking at runs scored as a measure of their performance. Batters are typically scoring fewer runs on an average. Under the colored jersey condition, vis-a-vis how much they would end up scoring on an average under the white jersey condition. And, it's the same story with strike rate. So not only are the batsmen scoring fewer runs on an average, but they're also scoring those runs at a relatively slower rate. So maybe 4 to 5 runs less out of every 100 deliveries faced. Determinants of economy rate. With this new definition of colored jersey, we again see that the bowlers are engaging in tighter bowling. The bowling is the approach to bowling is a lot grittier now, and this is true regardless of how many controls we introduce. And I mean, again, determinants of wicket obtained, that's the only performance indicator that actually remains statistically similar between the colored jerseys and the white jersey condition. So that's one way to modify, that's one robustness check. Then we also do this joint estimation of runs and strike rate on all the other exogenous variables and also of the economy rate and wickets. Why do we do that? Well, it's easy to see that in a limited overs format, when you have limited time to score as many runs as you can, you would ideally want to score as many runs as you can as quickly as possible. So there's this so you would expect the regressions of the regressions that have run scored as a dependent variable and strike rate as a dependent variable to have error terms that are correlated, because of idiosyncrasies. And and similarly for bowlers, when the bowlers are actually happy to concede a few runs in the initial overs if it also means that they can actually get a few more wickets. So clearly you would expect the error terms of those regressions to also be correlated. So we do a 3-stage least squares estimation, and the story remains pretty much the same. In the first two panels, we're looking at a joint estimation of run score and strike rate. Under the colored jersey conditions, we see that not only are the batsmen scoring fewer runs, but they're also scoring them slower on an average. And similarly, a joint estimation of economy rate and wickets taken, we kind of see a similar story. But over here, wickets taken has actually become significant, which basically means that bowlers are indeed performing better, under the colored jersey conditions vis-a-vis their own white jersey conditions. Then, one could actually argue that, since most of the colored jersey matches have been played with a white ball and which typically observes which typically offers a greater variation to the bowlers because of a coating on it. There's a wax coating on white leather balls that are used to play cricket. And and most of the white jersey matches, on the other hand, have been played using that red cricket ball. And it turns out that there have been a few matches that have been played using the red cricket ball under the colored jersey conditions, and using the white cricket ball using under the white jersey conditions. And these are essentially a few observations that actually contribute to the identification. We have that white ball dummy, which I have strategically colored in black fonts. The story is exactly the same. Batsmen are scoring fewer runs when the jerseys are colored, when the us versus them is a lot more salient vis-a-vis, in the white jersey conditions, where the us versus them is not salient. And it's the same story with the strike rate. The batsmen are not just scoring fewer runs on an average, but they're also scoring slower on an average when they are in the colored jersey condition. The bowlers, on the other hand, are doing better in the colored jersey condition vis-a-vis the white jersey condition. And for wickets obtained, it's pretty much a null result that we have. So what is it that could be driving these results? Well, the results that bowlers are performing better in colored jerseys, and the opposite is true for batsmen. Again, the comparison is not bowlers versus batsmen. The comparison is bowlers in white jerseys vis-a-vis bowlers in colored jerseys, and it's similarly for the batsmen in colored jerseys and batsmen in white jerseys. So it is possible that batsmen are adopting a more salient, and the bowlers, on the other hand, are becoming aggressors, resorting to a tighter bowling strategy, a grittier bowling strategy. So the attitude being that we are not going to give runs away to you. And why does that happen? Well, a part of the answer could be embedded within the structure of the game of cricket itself. What do I mean by that? Well, at any given point in time on the cricket field, there are only 2 batsmen and 11 bowlers/fielders. Under the white jersey conditions, they're all wearing white, but under the colored jersey conditions, it just means that the batsman is seeing only 2 members of its own color, including himself, vis-a-vis a greater number of the other color. And for the bowlers, they are clearly in the majority, and the other is actually in the minority. So it turns that identifiable group markers can actually boost your performance when you are in the majority, but sap your confidence when you are in the minority. The batsman, and the colored jersey condition always sees more of them vis-a-vis us. The bowler always sees more of us vis-a-vis them. There are 11 bowlers and only 2 batsmen on the field at any given point in time. And that may actually have a bearing on why, the batsmen tend to become a little cautious and the bowlers tend to become a little more aggressive or grittier. Is there a way to make a causal statement just on the last bit? Unfortunately, no. Like I said, that the experimental ideal has not been met. To make a causal statement, we will actually need a cricket match where or a version of cricket match where there are more batsmen on the field comparison with, in comparison with bowlers. But then whatever that game is, we all know that it's not cricket. So at this point in time, only in relation to the last statement, we're not able to make a causal claim. But then we don't potentially rule out that this is what is happening either. So on that note, I'm happy to conclude and take questions if any.
Okay, thanks very much, Subrato.
Thanks.
So it was a very interesting presentation. I'm going to give you a Teams round of applause here. And say that was great. We've got loads of time for questions and comments. And so, given there are no questions during your talk, hopefully there's lots of questions now. So please do raise your hands if you have any questions to put to Subrato. Stefan.
Hi, Subrato. That's it's really interesting and great to have more papers on cricket. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed that a lot. I guess I was just Googling this whilst you were talking, and it strikes me that there's maybe a little more to this story in terms of the adoption of colored clothing. So it wasn't. There's a whole history about about how this happened. So it starts off with the Australians during the Packer cricket circus back in the 70s, and it becomes adopted. And the adopters, those who are keen to adopt it, are, there's a selection mechanism here, and you probably know, and others might not be surprised to discover, that the English did not like this and were very conservative and were very reluctant to adopt it and were the slow adopters. And it also, that the point there being that that's mainly correlated with the fact that also during this era, independently, England were terrible. So they weren't any good. So in that sense, what you might be picking up here is just England not being slow adopters and not being very good at one-day cricket. So I'm just worried about that possibility. And I noticed that the other thing that struck me was that it's initially adopted for events like the World Cup. So my understanding was, and you might want to look at this in more detail, but my understanding was that if it wasn't the World Cup, then the two sides could agree between themselves. So, for example, India and Australia playing a friendly ODI might agree to play in colours. The India and England, stuffy England, is going to say, "Oh no way, we're not agreeing to that. We have to play in whites." So once again, you get a sort of a bias opposed in the sort of the quality of the game in which it's being played, and also, in the World Cup, obviously, well, not obviously, but one might expect the bowlers might be doing somewhat better in the World Cup, and it's harder to score in a World Cup. So I'm just worried that there are some of these effects that might be caught up here, which are difficult to disentangle. I guess you're going to say the fixed effects will capture that, but I'm not sure that the fixed effects are capturing these possibly underlying trends that could be attributed either to the player fixed effects or could be attributed to could get caught up in the color of the jersey if there are some selection effects.
You're on mute, Subrato.
Sorry about that.
Great.
I didn't realize that. So maybe I could actually begin with your second concern about, color jerseys being introduced only in World Cup. So if you remember, 1975, 1979, 1983, and 1987 World Cups were all played in white jerseys. So in the period between 1979 to 2000, it's just the 1992, 1996, and the 1999 World Cups that have been played in colored jerseys. So we actually have a greater number of World Cups played in the white jersey conditions in comparison with the number of World Cup matches played in the colored jersey conditions, at least in the data set that we're looking at. Now, about the English being more reluctant to adopt colored jerseys, probably seeing this as a rebarbative declension of sorts, I don't know. It's interesting to maybe imagine that, okay, at the team level, maybe just maybe some of the selection could some of the selection bias could actually creep into some of the results. But then, I'm actually imagining that even for the English squad, think from the perspective of every single player, because note that in our regressions, if the unit of observation is the ith player on his j8th match, right? So if I'm an English player and I'm basically competing against my fellow teammates to find a spot in the team. My a priori willingness to represent my country will not really depend on, whether a tournament is being played in colored jersey or white jerseys. Right. So at the individual level, I'm not really sure if the selection is really playing that big a role. And in any case, I mean, even if we were to maybe drop a few observations from the initial years of ODI cricket, we'll still have a great number of matches that are played in color and white jerseys, and I have a feeling that the results will by and large persist. And here's my reason why I feel that way. The reason is because the frequency of colored jersey ODI matches that were played, in the initial years that where the English were relatively reluctant, are likely to contribute a far smaller proportion of the matches that we actually have in the data set. So the averages that we are seeing, in the aggregate, we may actually still, I mean, I'm not saying that those selection effects are not there, but I'm just wondering if we should really worry about them too much. So I can be an English player, and I would still want to represent the England and Wales cricket team, regardless of whether the tournament is being played in colored or white jerseys. Remember that the unit of observation here is the IIT player on his J.th match.
Yeah, I mean, you could just test it by dropping England from the data and seeing how that affects it. I mean, because again, I would think England are a pretty large proportion of the data set, right? Because England tend to play a lot more games than almost anybody else, right? So, the England effect is in this case is possibly large,
But we do have country and opponent dummies in our regressions, so we do control for the England dummy in the regressions.
Oh well, very interesting though. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Stefan. Danielle, I think, is next. DP, I can see.
Yeah, that's me. Hi.
Yeah, great.
Very interesting. So I had a sort of clarifying question about the setup. So if I understand correctly, at the same time, simultaneously there could have been both white matches and colored matches, right? So India plays a match against England in 1995. They play in white, and then a month later they play against Australia and they wear their color jersey. That's the setup. Okay, but then you said that you're only restricting attention to a set of players who played a sufficiently large number of matches, and I don't really see why that restriction is necessary, because given the way that you set up the analysis, sure, there will be some players that only play in the period where it's prevalently white matches. When you throw in the fixed effects, those players will not contribute anything to the regression, so it's as if they're not there. But there's no reason why not to include some players that play only 10 ODI matches, and some of them in white and some of them in color jerseys. So I think that that could be easily done. That was
sure. In fact, that's exactly how he had started out. But then the referees, both of them from the first set of submissions, really did not like that, and thereafter we've kind of responded to incentives. Let's put it that way.
Okay. I would be curious if what happens if you lower the threshold.
Yeah,
so instead of 140 players,
typically remain the same. Yeah, the results typically remain the same. And over here, the criterion is that under either of the conditions, every player should have played about at least 10% of the matches, so that we have a significant weight for each player on either conditions. I mean, it kind of makes the result a little cleaner, but then, I do agree with you. I mean, is it a significant improvement vis-a-vis, including all the data, including of players who've only played in either in strictly one of the two conditions? Yeah, and I agree with you there. Yeah.
But okay, that's fine. So I have like two small questions about sort of the empirical strategy, or sort of comments. So it looked as if you're not controlling for inning, whether you're batting in the first inning or the second inning, and that is something that I think should matter for the run rate. Whether you're chasing a big total or trying to put up a big total, the style would be different. I don't expect that it's going to matter at all for your coefficients because it shouldn't be correlated with white or colored jerseys, but just seems like something that should be on the right hand side of a sort of cricket run scoring regression. There's one thing I didn't quite understand. The white ball, is that also correlated with playing at night?
Yeah, it is.
So that means playing like day-night games.
Yeah.
Okay.
So luckily,
and it's perfectly correlated. So white ball means it's a day-night game.
So that's the thing. We actually have all kinds of matches. Typically, the white ball is played under the day-night conditions under the colored jersey. Using under the colored jersey conditions. And but then in the past we have actually had matches that are played in white ball, wearing white jerseys, and matches that are played in red ball in colored jerseys as well. And
okay.
Those, I mean, of course, the relative frequency of those matches is kind of low on the whole, but then it does contribute to our identification.
Fine. I don't think it makes a huge difference. Anyway, last comment is about sort of interpretation. So you're putting this as a sort of us versus them, theory that, I play a different style when, or my performance deteriorates. I was wondering whether, there could be an alternative explanation that during this time and actually up to today, Test cricket is always played with white jerseys, right?
I mean, some of it has been played in colored jerseys as well.
But during your time period, it was definitely white, right?
So in the mid 1990s, some of the India versus West Indies tours, test tours happened in colored jerseys. Yeah.
So my hypothesis, my conjecture could be that there's some psychological factor that when you're playing in white, it's as if you're thinking that you're playing Test cricket, so you play a little bit more prudent, like slower run rate, don't go for the big shots, etc., etc. Maybe you can control with sort of number of Test appearances of the batter. That actually that would be sort of I don't know. I mean, whether you're on the Test team and that team, otherwise it's just going to be absorbed by the fixed effects. That could be a sort of alternative story.
No, thanks for that. Actually, I did not think of that, and I believe none of us authors have thought of that. So you're basically saying, and if I could, rephrase that a little bit, you're basically saying that, if I'm a batsman who's played a sufficient number of Test matches, the fact that I'm wearing a white jersey kind of puts me in that conditioning, in that mental conditioning, and therefore I approach my game accordingly. I play slower, and therefore on an average I score fewer runs. Yeah, maybe I could actually include maybe we could actually include the number of Test appearances
in the previous 12 months or something like that. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not going to make a big difference, but it could be sort of an alternative explanation of the results.
No, thanks for pointing that out. I mean, in fact, none of the referees have so far, so it's always good to think a little ahead.
All right. You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Daniele. Stefan again.
Yeah, Daniele's point made me think of something else that struck me as you were talking, which is another thing that's happening during this period, as you mentioned, is the advent of the day-night game. And again, an increasing proportion of these games are going to be day-night games. And I would have thought a higher proportion of colored clothing games are going to be day-night games. So was that a factor in did you include that already? Maybe you just include that and I've forgotten.
Yeah. So we actually include that via the introduction of the white ball and the red ball dummies. So typically day and night matches were played in white ball, the white cricket ball, and
right.
Yeah. And we do actually account for that in the colored jersey. Still, that dummy still remains significant. And the idea is that that yes, I mean, of course, most of the matches that were played under the day-night conditions were played in colored jerseys, and we all know that. But then the identification also comes from those very few matches that were played under the, white jersey, white ball condition vis-a-vis colored jersey, red ball condition. So we do have a few of those matches, in the within the data set that allow us to make a slightly stronger case for what's really happening.
Again, I'm with Daniele. I think the psychological explanation doesn't strike me as being overwhelmingly convincing. Feels like there sounds like it looks like there's something in your data. I think it's hard to see what else it could be, but the psychology just seems like a weird sort of story in some ways, and that colors would really make that much of a difference. But maybe it is. But it's all very interesting.
So we actually do have a publication where we are actually looking at the number of, just to control for workload, we do look at the number of test appearances in the last 12 months and the number of ODI appearances as well in the 12 months that lead, to the match. But then in this study specifically, we've not included that. But I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to maybe go back and look at it. I mean, we only hope that the color jersey dummy survives in terms of its statistical significance once we do that. But I see that there's this additional psychological effect. Since I've been conditioned to play test matches as a batsman in white jerseys, the fact that I'm wearing white jersey kind of maybe switches on that conditioning button. Yeah, but fortunately, I think that is something that we can actually go back and address immediately, because yeah.
Thanks, Stefan. Just on that, I may have missed it in your talks about it. Do you make use of the fact that presumably, I guess there isn't a one-for-one switch there where a player only plays in white and then from this point onwards he's playing in a coloured jersey? But I guess I'm just wondering whether you've included the number of times a player has played in a coloured jersey to get a sense of whether they kind of adapt to it. At first, the difference is really big, and then over time, the difference is getting smaller.
Yeah, that could be done. But we also have, controls for experience. So, how many matches have I already? How many ODI matches have you already played? Leading up to the j.th match. So yeah, we do have some controls for experience, but then what we saw was that experience is highly correlated with the age variable. For any given, but nonetheless, when we include that experience variable, the colored jersey dummy actually still survives, and it's just that the significance of both the experience and the age variables simultaneously drop. But then I think the age variable still remains significant, and that's the reason why we have them in the last set of regressions.
There's something there, I imagine, in the fact that more experience you are in general might make it harder for you to adjust, whereas the younger you are, the less you've got that accumulated stock of experience playing in white. Maybe the change is smaller again if you are a younger player or less experienced player.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah, in line with the earlier comment that since I have played. Since I'm too experienced, it essentially means that I've played a greater number of matches in this white jersey condition. So that conditioning is relatively strong, and maybe I just carry it within myself as a batsman to the field, even when I'm playing an ODI match. And yeah, I see that that kind of an alternate effect, being, maybe having some weight, and even if it doesn't, hopefully, kill the statistical significance of the colored jersey dummy, we can still control for it nonetheless. Yeah, I mean, so the only thing is that we also have the alternate definition of colored jersey variable, where we actually also look at the degrees of differences, right? So yeah, I mean, for now, although I'm not sure to what extent will that really address the concern that has been raised, but yeah, I think we'll probably have to look back at the data and include a few additional columns. But thanks for pointing that out. I think it's a valid point. I mean, the number of test appearances for any batter or a bowler should actually capture some of that psychological effect. And after the inclusion of this variable, if the colored jersey dummy still survives in terms of statistical significance, maybe we have a stronger story there. So thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
Alex has had his hand up for a while. Sorry to keep you waiting, Alex.
That's fine. So thank you very much for a very nice presentation. I'm not a big expert in cricket, but I'm wondering, you have data from like 10, 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether something has happened over the years with the game of cricket, whether there were some changes in the rule of the game, maybe the game became more offensive, more defensive, I don't know. And then in the early period, you had more games with white, and then in a later period, you have more games in the color. And it's not about psychology or color, but about something that is around the game. Maybe the game has changed, and you are using fixed effects like player fixed effects, but you don't really use other players' fixed effects, because other players may also affect me, someone who played 10 years ago, right? And this may drive the results.
Yeah, so we actually partially control for that with the introduction of year dummies in our later specifications, and and you're indeed right that that there have been rule changes, particularly during the late 1990s, and the frequency of those rule changes, particularly during 2000s, were massive. This is, I mean, of course, following the match fixing scandal, and then there was also this introduction of T20 cricket, which is the quicker form of the quickest form of cricket that we know today. Now the thing is that the introduction of the Duckworth-Lewis method back in 1997, and the introduction of the third umpire, for decisions in relation to run out. So these have been certain technological. There have been these technological improvements and rule-based improvements, but then I'm assuming that the introduction of year dummies should partially at least account for those effects. And luckily, within this period of 1979 to 2000, I mean, at least the number of rule changes were not as massive in comparison with some of the sheer volume of rule changes that we've seen after 2000s, with the introduction of the power play, 2 white balls and so on and so forth. In fact, there are articles that are written where the authors literally bemoan the fact that cricket, ODI cricket, is becoming more and more batter friendly, and it's harder for the bowlers to perform and maintain high performance levels. But then most of the concerns that you point out are probably more fitting or probably more applicable to the period of after 2000 in ODI cricket. And indeed, most of these articles that have been published after 2000 about how ODI cricket is becoming more batter friendly, and it's not favoring the bowlers and so on and so forth. But my only line of defense right now is the introduction of year dummies, and we can of course go back and introduce dummy variables for I don't know, for matches that had implemented a few rule changes here and there, but I'm assuming that on the whole they ought to have little bearing on the color jersey dummy, really. I mean, I don't see any reason why those variables should be correlated with the jersey colors that are
but I'll tell you something. So while year dummies obviously control for everything that was constant within this year, but let's say the number of games I'm playing, and I'm old, is not the same as the number of players that some other players play, and the style of game and everything. So this is clearly not not controlled within the year's dummy, for sure. And the other thing is that I'm not. What is it? What's the exact psychological effect that you are talking about? What is the mechanism? What's the?
So the mechanism is that the batsmen and the bowlers are on the field, and under the colored jersey conditions, the us versus them becomes a lot more salient when you are wearing a different color jersey vis-a-vis I as a batsman, right? Then suppose you're the bowler and I'm the batsman. I see there's more of them vis-a-vis us, on the field, and that maybe has a bearing on how I choose to bat, possibly making me a little more cautious in my batting approach. So I'm willing to maybe not take too many risks and score and maybe settle in the process for a slower uh, rate of run scoring.
Is it backed by literature? Because that would be very helpful. That you would say, look, this and this study used MRI scanning, and they found that white color, whatever it does. Is it backed, or is it just your hypothesis?
So, so the thing is that cricket is the only sport that has been played in colored and white jerseys, these two conditions. If you look at any other group or team sport, something like a basketball, when you're watching a basketball match or a soccer match, or a football match, you'll immediately be able to tell apart, who belongs to which team. You see what I'm saying? It's easy for you to, that team yellow versus team red is a lot more salient, and a basketball game has never been played, under the same jersey conditions where both the opponent teams wear the exact same jersey. That has never happened, right? So cricket kind of offers that flexibility and that exogeneity and that uniqueness, of course. I think cricket is the only team sport, involving several
So what I said actually, and this is a very nice experiment, but what I said would be nice if you could back it up with some scientific references that say, look, different colors or white color or whatever color has a different effect on performance. Because now it's kind of what you say, and let me quote Stefan, why should I believe you?
No, that's a fair point, and always a fair point in relation to any empirical work. But I wish I had more. I don't know. I wish there was at least another parallel sport that was played in in both the conditions. A team sport that was played in both the conditions where we could actually look at and but having said that, I don't also mind being the first to have introduced a certain if you know what I mean, a certain channel. So yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point that you've made, and do different colors have does just wearing different colors have a bearing on one's performance? Well, in the context of cricket, we see that is the case. But then to delve or probe any further into any causal mechanism, will probably need me to look at other sports or other literature on other sports where team sports that have also seen matches that have been played in the same in these two conditions. In the first condition where both the opponent teams play the exact same outfit, and vis-a-vis where they play against each other wearing different outfits. But I'm not sure if any other game, any game other than cricket has had that luxury. So yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Just a thought on any changes taking place in the game over that period, Subrato. Wasn't it around then that the umpires stopped being from their home nation and became neutral?
Yeah, sure. But I'm assuming that those effects would be consistent for both the players and the opponents at the same time.
The other thing I'm wondering there is, you've couched this in terms of an us versus them, in the title, and I guess the colours kind of bring out those differences a bit more, and the us versus them, the them also includes the umpire, doesn't it? And maybe when you're playing at home, the umpire's part of the us, and then becomes part. I don't know, just thinking out loud about that as a potential change that happened around the same time.
Sorry, let me interrupt again. Is there any home advantage thing here in your data?
So we do actually have venue dummies included in the So
no, not the venue dummies. Whether when I wear different colors, do I play at home or not?
No, so there's no hard and fast rule about whether most of the matches that have been played at home were played in colored or white jerseys. So matches that have been played in India have been played in both colored and white jerseys, and that's also true for other countries as well. Yeah.
But there also isn't a switch in home and away jerseys either, right? A nation will just have the same color throughout. Is that right, Subrato? There isn't home and away shirts, and
see, that happened,
changing
that
their
only
colors.
happened after 2000. It is only after 2000 that it was decided by the ICC and all the individual cricket boards of different nations that all matches in ODI going forward will be played strictly in colored jerseys. So before 2000, there was no hard and fast rule about specific to that. And of course, before 1979, it was all white jerseys. No matter ODI or Test matches, it was all white jerseys through, and that was kind of the norm.
And when they're told in 2000 it's got to be colored jersey, does that mean that they can't play in white anymore? Could a team not decide they want to just play in a white jersey?
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. Yeah.
Right. So you're banned. Yeah. So I mean, obviously in football you have teams that play in white, but I guess you can't do that in cricket then.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that was the case. I mean, I'm happy to actually host a tournament, a cricket tournament between two countries with the exact same team, the exact same venue, But yeah, that'll be quite the luxury.
Daniele, so you've been waiting a while.
Yeah. So, one quick suggestion. So this speaks to some of the comments that have been raised. I think you could include opponent times year dummies in the regression that would capture the fact that maybe England was really terrible and they were playing a lot of they insisted on playing white, but England is differently terrible in 1980 versus 1990, and so that is something that is really straightforward to do, and that can at least address that concern.
So opponent interacted with time.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's not absorbed by the fixed effects, and you can easily do that.
Yeah, I see.
The other question. So I'm not sure I understand your different shades of blue strategy. So what did you do there? Did you treat different shades of blue as if they're white? You excluded them from the sample. You treated them as a separate category. I didn't understand what because that does speak to a little bit to the us versus them, and maybe if you could show those results again, because it wasn't clear what you were doing.
Sure, I'll do that right away. And all right, so what we did here was that we modified the way the 1 second. Yeah. So what we did was we actually modified the way the colored jersey dummy was defined.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So in the initial specifications, if it's a white jersey game, the colored jersey dummy takes a value 0. But if it's a colored jersey game, then the colored jersey dummy takes a value 1. Okay. Now, how is this different? All right. So what we do here is that, for white jerseys, it continues to be 0.
Okay.
All right. Now, for colored jerseys, there are two different colors. Let's say India versus Australia is like, played. It's like team blue versus team yellow, right? For matches like these, the dummy variable takes a value 1. So these are, matches between two distinct colors.
Okay.
But then a match like India versus Sri Lanka is basically, you know, a lighter shade of blue versus a darker shade of blue.
Okay.
So for these matches, the colored jersey dummy variable takes a value 0.5.
I see.
It's somewhere between the two extremes of two completely different colors and the exact same color. You know, two different shades of the same color. So there's some us versus them, but it's not as extreme
okay,
as
understood. And so can you show me compare like the main specification, what those coefficients look like, this like run scored specification?
Sure. Yeah. 1 second. So
yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So it's almost identical coefficients.
Almost identical. Yeah.
I'm wondering whether that tells us something. And I don't know, maybe my question was, what if you either classify different shades of blue as, 0 instead of 0.5, or, throw them out of the sample? Do the results become stronger, like in the main specification, right? I think that, if you want to really push that us versus them, you could try to do more with these sort of, different shade specification and see whether you're getting, similar things. So my story is that, if people misperceive light blue versus dark blue, or Sri Lanka blue versus India blue as almost the same thing, then for those types of matches it should be a lot more. If it looks a lot more like the white jersey matches, then that says something about the us versus them theory.
No, I think that's an excellent suggestion, and something that is immediately doable. So I'm happy to take that and maybe get back to you on. So basically, if so, there are two ways of looking at it. If it's two shades, can we just code it as 0, meaning it's just blue versus blue and color doesn't matter. And on the other hand, we could completely drop India versus Sri Lanka, or Pakistan versus South Africa. Blue versus blue vis-a-vis green versus green, and then see if the results really survive, because then it'll be an additional robustness check that actually supports the story of us versus them. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Daniele. Stefan.
Yeah, the more time we spend on this, I think the more things we could think of, right? It's again, but it's because it's so interesting. I think it makes it worthwhile. So one additional thing, going back to the nationality thing, I just strike me the simplest thing, wouldn't it be just to interact the nationality with the colored jersey effect to see if there is any variation by country, and that would kind of settle it, I would have thought. So that's one thought, and then the other thought that's come to me now is that the story that the bats are being less aggressive in the colored jerseys and are batting for longer. Maybe it's not so much to do with the bowlers as to do with the fielders, and maybe it's something to do with the colored jerseys changes the salience of the fielders. So one thing that struck me might be interesting to you could look at is how batters got out. So there's a difference between being bowled and being caught at cow corner, right? So that's why it might be worth thinking about whether the nature of dismissals was changing because of the effect was coming through fielding, not necessarily directly through bowling.
Right. Sure. But then, so if a batsman is caught out, I mean, it is still a bowler's wicket, isn't it? I mean, so in terms of the outcome, if I'm a bowler, if I'm bowling someone out, if I hit the wicket, vis-a-vis if some fielder takes the catch of the batsman that I'm bowling to, it's my wicket either way, isn't it?
Right, but but in some sense, I would think if you're bowled or caught by the wicketkeeper, then that in some sense is a reflection of the aggression of the bowler, which is something you were talking about as being significant. Whereas, as I say, if you're caught swinging for the fences, then that probably means that that's more on the batter. Yeah, so it could reflect their reduction in aggression. And it's not perfect, but I think it might capture a little bit of the difference. And not hard to do, I guess, because it's not. You can measure the how out. You must have the how out data in your data set as well. So
right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be difficult to see if there was anything there.
Yeah, I'll have to give it a bit of a thought. So yeah, if I'm caught out in the deep, chances are that I got out taking risks, in which case my batting was a little more aggressive. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have a lot of slips in the one day, so I would say caught by the wicketkeeper, you can figure that out. That's not hard to do. That's probably more on the skill of the bowler, but any other catch, it's more likely you're caught that you're playing an aggressive stroke. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but it's more likely that you were out due to your aggression.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, will a player fix effect really control for that? And if it does, to what extent? I mean, some players like Vivian Richards were naturally aggressive. Richard Richardson, the so-called pinch hitters, Sanat Jayasuriya, and so on and so forth. But then there were others who kind of continued to play the more traditional form, play cricket in the way it was played traditionally. For example, Rahul Dravid, not taking too many risks and so on and so forth. But then, yeah, I mean, how the batsmen basically get out could, yeah, maybe there's some story there that we haven't really looked at yet. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll probably have to think about it a little deeper.
Great, thanks again, Stefan. There's a bunch of questions in the chat which I'll get to, but Johan has asked a few of them, and Johan's got his hand up. So I figure, Johan, you can either ask those questions and the one you've got, or refer Subrato to the chat. But Johan, go ahead.
I'll just go for the question I've got in the mind. So this might be a silly solution about the colours thing and the tribal, but I remember Gary Balance mentioning that he really struggled against the pink ball because he's colourblind. Now, I know Ian Botham was colourblind, and he'll be in your sample. I'm just wondering if you have probably a very small number of people, but could you potentially look to exploit something like that to compare?
Wow. Okay. Ian Botham was colorblind. I had no idea. Wait, let me just write that down before I forget it. I'll just take exactly 11 seconds. 11 being for my love of prime numbers. Okay. Ian Botham was colorblind. Okay. Wow. I need to take a look at that, because that will, I mean, definitely have a bearing on. But I mean, isn't color blindness more about how you see one color relative to others, instead of how it is seen, as a color in its own right? So, for instance, if I have red dots and there are a few green dots in the middle of it, making a certain image or something that's recognizable, can I still recognize the greens among the red? I think that is how color blindness is formally defined in the medical sciences. Instead of the kind of color blindness that emerges because of, let's say, deficiencies or defects in the cones of the eyes. So, for instance, can you tell apart green from yellow? And the reason why the deer cannot tell apart a tiger that is hiding in the bushes is because it cannot tell apart green vis-a-vis yellow as well as we can. And so what's the nature of color blindness? That's something that we really need to think a little bit about. But I can definitely answer or address your point in relation to use of pink cricket ball. Luckily, in the period that we are looking at, the pink cricket ball was not used in any of the matches that we have the data for. So the pink cricket ball is a relatively new phenomenon, probably introduced in the last 10 years. Yeah, or maybe 15 years at the most. Either way, it was introduced way after 2000.
Great, thanks, Subrato. So in the chat, there's a few questions that I'll put to you now as we wrap up. First one is Johan said, could you play around with the 11 versus 2 on the field at any point in time using field positions, e.g. if they're within the circle, excluding power plays? Was first question.
Sorry,
see the
come
chat
again?
Just to be clear, that means like when the power play happens, obviously it's going to change the number of people, but once the power play has happened, do they actually put more people out of the circle, etc.? That's what I was meaning, kind of thing. So using deviations within that power play voluntarily.
I mean, yeah, sure, but the point is that we can add, since the unit of observation is the ith player in the jth match, whether a match really had power play implemented, and that could be maybe introduced as a separate dummy, but then it'll be applicable to the whole match because it kind of affects everybody and not just that one batsman who's playing it, who's playing the match, right? I mean, I don't know if there's a way to uniquely code field positions, and fortunately, again, power play is not something that is seen very often in our data set. I mean, power play is also a relatively recent phenomenon in ODI cricket. So, I mean, yeah, if at all there were other variations or versions of power play that were introduced earlier on, maybe we just need to, go back and look at the data and see if these conditions could be counted as power play or something similar to the modern ways in which power play is defined.
Yeah, the field restrictions and stuff. Yeah, just an idea.
Yeah. So I mean, field restrictions are relatively recent in ODI cricket. That's I mean, 2000 is still 25 years back. So yeah.
Scary thought. And then one other thing I'll just plug up quickly before we wrap up is Aravind says, I wonder if there might be an endogenous feedback loop where teams, consciously or not, choose colours that signal aggression or dominance, and opponents then respond to that signal in kind. On that note, could that colour psychology in that sense gradually shape both strategic and branding decisions over time?
Oh, well, so, we were thinking of giving it a political economy angle instead of a marketing angle. So on a lighter note, but then I think, so, if red is really a color of aggression, and that's indeed what we see in some of the other sports related literature in relation to Entlot cognition, I'm not sure if I remember a single team in ODI cricket that has ever put on a red a red color jersey, at least within 1979 to 2000, and if that has indeed been the case, if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. I mean, the closest is, I don't know, Holland wearing that very bright I don't know, orange t-shirt or orange jerseys, and Zimbabwe wearing different shades of pink. But then in the period that we're really looking at, Zimbabwe and Holland have relatively fewer matches, in comparison with Australia or in England or West Indies or India, Pakistan, and so on and so forth. Even South Africa, by the way, we only observe matches of South Africa during the later periods.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much, Subrato. You fielded a very long Q&A session there, lots of questions and lots of suggestions for you. So thank you for provoking such discussion with a really interesting presentation.
Thanks.
We will return next week, November the 14th, and we'll have Galila Nasser from Bielefeld University presenting Beyond Talent Managerial Stability, Club Ownership and Team Success in the Egyptian Football League. So thank you again, Subrato. Thank you, everybody. Great pleasure to see you all online, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have
It's
a
been
great
a pleasure.
weekend.
Thanks.
Cheers, Subrato. Bye-bye.
Cheers.